forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger 10. Here's Steve Deace.
And greetings. Welcome to this week's episode of Bigger 10. You know, it's not yet Memorial Day, but by the time most of you watch this, we will be down to 100 days or less until Illinois and Nebraska kick off the 2021 college football season. Let's welcome in my co-host, Aaron McIntyre. Good to see you, brother. How are you?
Doing well. We're at that part of the year when, you know, last Friday, Saturday night, I broke out the NCAA football 14. I'm like, hey, this will be kind of nice to watch.
Indeed. Yeah, I've been watching some old stuff on YouTube. So we're getting there. We're getting back in the mood. The preview magazines will all be out here in the next few weeks. You'll have the Hall of Fame game to bet on as the degenerate you are in just about 80 days. So it's almost the most wonderful time of the year. Still, it is the off season here on Bigger 10, and some of you may be wondering, what kind of content are you guys going to generate here during the off season? Well, for this week's episode, we thought it might be fun. I often, for my college football preview every year, I open it up each year. The first thing is my crystal ball predictions of what I think will happen that college football season from a big picture standpoint. What if we added even more ethanol to the crystal ball, give it even more juice so it could gaze out 5 years into the future? And so on this week's episode, we're peeking ahead to Big Ten 2026. These are 5 predictions in our Big Five here on Bigger 10. These are 5 predictions that I have made, things I think will occur. I think these things will happen in the next 5 years. And then, Aaron, you're going to decide, is that crazy? Is it nuts? Is it no way? Or is it just about right? You ready to go?
Absolutely.
Let's begin with a change that I think won't just happen in the Big Ten. I think this is going to happen everywhere in the next 5 years, because I think the expansion of college football's playoff is going to be directly tied to conference championships. And so I think you're going to see every conference do this. The ACC suspended it last year because of COVID and ended up with the championship game everybody wanted, right? Clemson and Notre Dame, okay? And so I think the divisions will be gone in the Big Ten in the next 5 years, and it will be directly tied to the expansion of the college football playoff and automatic bids. We won't have leaders and legends anymore, nor will there be East and West as there is now. But Aaron, it will be 14 teams all in one division. And I would not even rule out expanding to 16 with the new TV contract and the new playoff. I don't think it will happen, but I don't think it's like 1% odds either that we'll see another round of musical chairs. But at the very least, I think everybody in the same conference as it used to be, with a round robin schedule, and then the 2 teams that finish 1-2 in the standings at the end of the year are who end up playing in the conference championship game.
I agree with this prediction. Last I heard, the playoff is expanding. Okay, that's stipulated. It sounds like it actually could expand up to 12 teams. I don't know if you've heard that scuttlebutt as well. So
I think they're mulling over. Do we just expand enough to max out an expansion now so we're not doing this every 3 or 5 years?
Yeah.
I think that's what they're debating.
And that's smart,
yeah.
I think. I think there needs to be some stability. So I'm going to give you the objective standpoint here, and this is probably going to be the one that we'll spend the most time on of any of these 5. The objective view, and then a view as a fan of a team like Iowa. So the fan view in me says, don't get rid of the divisions. I like the feeling that there's just a chance. You're telling me there's a chance every year that Iowa could win the West and then pull a rabbit out of the hat in the Big Ten championship game and probably make it to the playoff in that scenario. And that was true. That type of line of thinking for an Iowa fan, for let's say a Minnesota fan now, for a Nebraska fan if they ever turned it around, for fans of teams that are not in that upper echelon, there's always that fighting chance. That was true with the 4-team playoff, where you needed all of those dominoes to line up just right. It's like maybe a 10-to-1 parlay, if you want to put it like that, to make it to the college football playoff. Because outside of winning your conference and thereby winning your division as well, there's a very little chance that you are going to make the playoff. That's obvious with 4 teams. Now you go to 12. I would argue actually now with 12 and getting rid of the divisions, there's a better chance of you making the college football playoff now, if it is going to 12, than there ever was before, if you're a fan of a team like Iowa. Now, whether or not that's an actual significant change, that remains to be debated, but that's the fan perspective. Objectively, get rid of the divisions. The best teams absolutely should be playing, not only for the conference championship, but in the college football playoff as well. We can't do another 2, 3, 4, 5 years of Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama, Clemson, Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson. We cannot do that. I mean, the TV ratings of this last year, still monstrous, still really good. That's not really, I don't think, what they were expecting. Okay, they got to get a huge bang for their buck. I don't know if college football playoff national championship will ever, near the levels consistently that the Super Bowl does, or even, all things considered, the NCAA tournament, but they're wanting to be in that range. And so the way to do that is as much parity as possible, playing your way in as much as possible, and then the best teams competing in the playoffs. Now, Steve, we still might end up with Ohio State, Clemson, Ohio State, Alabama,
Right.
Clemson every year. In fact, that's probably going to happen, but at least you're going to get more regions and more eyeballs in those regions. So those are the kind of the things that I'm weighing objectively, and then from a fan perspective, I think getting rid of the divisions has to happen.
So 2 things in response to what you said, which was a lot of good stuff. See, I actually believe expanding the playoff will dramatically democratize the sport, because we just lived through this for 40 years in college basketball. The first year the tournament expanded to 64 teams. I mean, look, the first year the tournament expanded to seeding in 1979, an Ivy League team made the Final Four. The first year the tournament expanded to 64 teams, a number 8 seed won the national championship. 3 years later, a number 6 seed won the national championship. See, here's what happens. What happens when there is a notion of expanded opportunity. Right now on Alabama, Clemson, and Ohio State's roster, guys, combined on those 3 teams, there's about 50 players on those 3 rosters right now that are not going to play very much this year, but would be playing a crap ton at Iowa, Michigan, a lot of schools that are perennially ranked programs, okay,
Yep.
who realistically can say, if everything goes right, we can compete for a Big Ten championship, all right? They would be playing a lot at those next 25, 30 schools. So what do we see in college basketball? Even before the transfer rule that you don't have to sit out anymore, we were already sitting on 40% of college basketball players will transfer at least one time in their careers. The democratization of the sport means that, I can go to another school and play a lot and have a chance to go to a Final Four. Those schools can go there. Providence can go to Final Fours. Right? Villanova can go to Final Fours. So that it democratized the way the sport recruits and everything else, because I'm not just going to sit here at North Carolina, Kentucky, Kansas, and 5 other schools, UCLA and Indiana, and wait for my turn. And then when it's my turn, I don't have to wait for my turn anymore. The same's going to apply here, where I don't have to sit here and just wait for 2 years for, Mac Jones doesn't have to wait 2 years behind Tua Tagovailoa anymore. You just go to someplace else and play right away and also have a legit chance at a championship. You're going to see a lot more of that, particularly now that you expand opportunity alongside I don't have to sit out a year, and now I can transfer intra-conference without any penalty on top of that. I think that will dramatically democratize the sport. We saw it right away in basketball. It'll take a little longer in football because you're playing 22 guys at a time and 11 on each side as opposed to 5. But I do think within the first few years, you will already see and then there's injuries and everything else, make Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State all play an extra game. Justin Fields have to play an extra game last year with those bruised ribs or whatever it was that he had. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that absolutely will increase the margin for error, which will democratize the sport. And every time I hear this discussed on national podcasts and shows, they always keep going back to, well, we'll just have the same 4 teams. It's like they don't follow college basketball at all and how it changed the culture of that sport. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, then you also have to throw, when you're talking about democratization, you also have to throw NIL in there as well. Which
there you
will
go. Yeah.
Further
Didn't even bring that up.
Because I was listening to Hawkeye Podcast. It's the podcast your old buddy John Miller started just a few months ago. He had Scott Docterman on from The Athletic, and he's made the same point that I've made a few times as well, talking about NIL. Your market value in a place like Lincoln and Iowa City and Ames, I know they're not in the Big Ten, is a hell of a lot more than your market value is in Los Angeles or Seattle.
You're right.
That's because those markets, they're little fish in big ponds.
Yep.
In those other types of markets, you're big fish in little ponds. So that has to be taken into account in this conversation as well. Because those things, would you rather be making, I don't know, 10 grand at Bubba's car dealership in Iowa City or Lincoln and playing? Or would you rather be sitting on the sidelines waiting for Tua Tagovailoa's fifth cousin playing, in front of you at Alabama? So those are things that are really going to, I think, help the sport. And it has to be considered in this conversation as well.
On the 12-team format, what would that be? So we have 5 automatic berths, right, for the conference champs. Notre Dame, I'm guessing, if it reaches a certain ranking, like top 12 for a 12-team playoff. And then the group of 5 highest ranked team would get an automatic bid every year to avoid federal antitrust lawsuits. Okay, so every year that's 6 or 7 bids, depending on where Notre Dame is ranked, right? And then the rest are at-large bids.
Yep.
So some years we have 6 at-large bids, and some years we have 5, depending on whether Notre Dame can crack the top 12. Is that how that would work?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. Speaking of national championships, second prediction for the next 5 years. Things I think we'll see between now and 2026 in the Big Ten. I think the Big Ten is going to win 2 national championships in 2 of these 3 sports. And I don't know which 3, but I think it'll be 2 of these 3 given the progress the league is making nationally. Softball, where the league hasn't won it since 2005. Hockey, where the league hasn't won it since 2007. And baseball, where the league hasn't won it since 1966. I think, Michigan almost won it in baseball a couple of years ago. I think we are going to see our league's going to win national championships in 2 of those 3 sports in the next 5 years.
The fact that you can plausibly put out that Big Ten might win a baseball championship without getting drug tested automatically is a testament to how much progress you talk about.
And hockey's not a big stretch. Let's be honest about that. Our league's always been really good at that. But yeah.
But especially with baseball, that is a testament that you can say that with some validity and not get drug tested right away because the Southern schools. Did you see? I think it was about 3 weeks ago the Ole Miss Mississippi State game. I mean, it is a huge part. I mean, the stands were packed. Now, that is a rivalry, but in the South, at the Southern colleges and universities, baseball is somewhat of a revenue sport down there. It's hard to believe for us Northerners, but it is a bit of a revenue sport down there. And to be saying that that the Big Ten could actually not only make a deep run in the tournament, which has already happened, but actually win it. That's a huge testament. And then I mean, just look at a team, again, going back, low-hanging fruit like Iowa, not even on the college baseball radar, like 10 years ago. They've made the tournament, I think, a couple of times in the past 5-6 years and have won the Big Ten tournament at least once as well. That's a pretty big deal. When a team like Iowa can have some level of success, that actually speaks well of your entire league.
All right, next prediction. Between now and 2026, 3 of the 8 winningest programs of all time, which reside in our league, from a football perspective, Michigan, Penn State, and Nebraska. All 3 of those teams will make at least one head coaching change, which means I think one may have to make 2. But all 3 of those schools will be making at least one head coaching change within the next 5 years. 3 of the 8 winningest programs of all time, 2 of them currently helmed by cherished alumni. Your thoughts?
Yeah, and I think of those 3 schools that you mentioned, the one or the 2 that are most likely to have multiple coaching changes are the ones that are being helmed by cherished alumni. I think either Nebraska or Michigan. I don't know which one has a bigger hole to climb out of. It seems weird talking about that with Michigan, with the success outside of beating Ohio State that they have enjoyed, minus the last couple of years with Jim Harbaugh at the helm. I think Nebraska has in terms of getting back to blue blood status, Nebraska has a bigger hole to climb.
They just don't have to climb the Ohio State hill right now. Michigan does. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's fascinating. I don't really know. At a place like Michigan, it's a lot different than a place like Nebraska. And a place like Penn State is a lot different than Michigan as well. So I would say it's probably tied between Michigan and Nebraska as far as who's most likely to hire a second head coach, because those places are just so different in what they can actually get away with, the type of person that they can hire. There's just a lot of variables there, but it's interesting, and it's a little bit perplexing that we're continuing to have these conversations. I remember, I don't want to say, it's probably been about a decade ago now, at least the last half decade, where it's like, okay, this is going to be the guy to bring Nebraska back. Scott Frost, he's the savior come to town. They were writing comics about him. Jim Harbaugh has been, as you know, you don't need me to tell you, a supreme disappointment. Penn State kind of gets away with it because they've beaten Michigan a few times and they've had some level of success, and they're not Ohio State's chief rivals. So
right.
I think they're closer to cratering, as far as Penn State goes, than a lot of people would suspect. But it's still incredible that we're talking about this.
Number 2, I think the Big Ten finally ends its drought in the NCAA tournament, wins at least one NCAA men's basketball tournament in the next 5 years, which would be the league's first since Michigan State won under Tom Izzo back in 2000, so well over 20 years.
Yeah, you would say the law of averages with the number of great teams that the Big Ten has produced in that time. You would think we'd or maybe progress to the mean there. So I think it has to happen sooner than later. So I think that's a pretty good prediction.
And then my number 1 prediction for the next 5 years of Big Ten athletics. Give me a moment. It's this one's going to be tough to verbalize. It was easier to write it. Even writing it, I got this I thought maybe I'd gotten the Johnson & Johnson vaccine. My right arm stopped working. Okay.
Right.
Saying it though, verbalizing it out loud is even more difficult, but give me a second. Hamana. Okay. No one other than Ohio State wins a Big Ten football championship.
This is by far your worst prediction.
And since they've already won 4 in a row, that would make it 9 in a row.
They're not winning 9 in a row. They're not winning 9 in a row.
Please tell me you're right.
Yeah, there's no way they're winning 9 in a row. That's impossible. It's impossible for any league nowadays to win 9 in a row.
Luke thought it was impossible. Darth Vader was his father.
Somebody in 5 years is going to dig this out, probably. But it's more likely that they're going to get bitten by the injury bug. They were giving away apparel for 2 tattoos instead of 1, and so the NCAA comes and blows up their program. It's more likely that something like that is going to happen in the next 5 years than that they win the league 9 years in a row. So that's my thinking.
Please be right. Please be right. And now the return of Would You Rather here on Bigger Ten. So, Aaron, I begin with you. Would you rather try to unseat Ohio State as Big Ten football behemoth or win the conference's first NCAA tournament in over 20 years? What's harder to do, beating the singular giant or slaying the giants in a sport of 330-plus teams? What do you think?
If it's a question of what's easier to do, I would say unseating Ohio State. If it's a question of what I would rather do, I'd say it's winning the NCAA tournament for the first time in the last 20 years. Guys, making it to the Final Four is a bigger accomplishment than winning the Super Bowl. There, I said it. And it's true because of the sheer number of teams that you have to beat.
The amount of variance,
Exactly.
everything else. Yeah.
So
Interesting. Okay.
So that's my input on that anyway.
Okay.
Would you rather have Iowa's first 2 games or Ohio State's first 2 games? So Iowa is Indiana at home, and Iowa State on the road, a top 10 Iowa State. Ohio State's first 2 games are at Minnesota and then Oregon at home.
I'd rather have Ohio State's first 2 games because I'd rather have Ohio State's talent. I think that makes a big difference ultimately. You know, the way that Iowa's season begins is fascinating because what's Michael Penix's status going to be for Indiana? He's still recovering from that ACL. You know, he's had 2 seasons now, cut short by season-ending injuries. And if you go look at his stats last year, so he had the one great poster play to beat Penn State on the lunge, and whether he got in or not, that'll be debated forever, right? He lit Michigan up, but then you saw that statistically Michigan had one of its worst defenses in the history of the program. Everybody lit them up. You look at the rest of his stats, like a 56% completion percentage, which is really bad for college football if you expect to have a good team. Did they look that much different offensively when the Utah transfer, was it Jake or Jack Tuttle came in at the end of the year? Won that big game on the road against Wisconsin, remember? Mm-hmm. I don't know that. And you wonder with the way Indiana plays defense now, do you almost kind of, if you're a defensive coordinator like Tom Allen, you kind of have a guy that kind of it's just Iowa's the game for you, right? Manages the game, you know? So I think that opener against Indiana is fascinating over which quarterback will be healthy enough to start for Indiana, and then which quarterback ends up starting for Iowa. And then you turn around and have that, you know, you go on the road against an Iowa State team that this is going to be the highest preseason rating they've ever had. Yeah, it's the one thing Matt Campbell has not done that's a realistic goal. I mean, he hasn't won you could technically say he won the Big 12. They finished first in the regular season. You know, it's not the official title, though, you know. But the one clear check mark that Boxey has not checked is beating Iowa, right? I just think, given where the personnel is, those 2 games are more treacherous for Iowa than the first 2 games are for Ohio State. And I got a lot of respect for Oregon. You know, my team total talent ratings have them clearly the most talented team in the Pac-12. But I just think Ohio State, with their talent, their 2 games just are easier. For you, would you rather be the AD at Michigan or Nebraska, which could each be facing the likelihood of having to fire favorite son head coaches in the near future? Which of those 2 guys would you rather be? Bill Moose at Nebraska or Ward Manuel at the University of Michigan? Now, Moose would have to fire the guy he brought in and linked his future to. Ward Manuel have to fire his old college teammate. Okay? So which of those 2 guys would you rather have to be?
Bill Moose. I think you have more freedom to hire who you want to hire at Nebraska. The political culture at Michigan just doesn't allow you to do that unless you get a favored son like Jim Harbaugh, and I doubt the appetite for doing another favored son type thing is going to be super.
If I want to go to renegade, more JUCO route, my
my
administration will let me do that in Nebraska?
Yep. So that's who I'd rather be. Final one is for you. Would you rather be the starting quarterback at Michigan State or Nebraska this coming season?
Nebraska. With Scott Frost's, I just trust his coaching resume on the offensive side of the football more than whatever's going on at Michigan State. I actually think Nebraska is going to be good on the lines from what I'm seeing. It's now I'm just kind of wondering now with Wan'Dale Robinson moving on, who's the playmaker, right? But I think Nebraska is just further along in their development, so I'd rather go that route with them than Michigan State. Plus, that gets me out of playing all those teams in the East, right? I have to play a couple of them still on the schedule, but now I don't have to play them all. So that'll do it for our Would You Rather this week. We'll come back with our feedback of the week, results of our Twitter poll, and more next. This week's Twitter poll results. Look at these results. I want to get your take on this for sure, Aaron. Do you feel safe returning to a Big Ten football stadium this fall? Now, I figured with our audience and following that the number would be a strong majority would say yes. I did not think it was going to be 96% yes, though, and only 4% no. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, is that decisive?
I kind of feel it's at least approaching that.
Yeah, just a little bit decisive. I think there's a huge appetite, I should say, for getting back. You know, if you're somebody like I am, and try to make it to at least one either Iowa or Chiefs game every year. That, you know, I think there's a huge appetite, and if I didn't have a kid on the way, we would definitely be back in August, I should say. We would definitely be back there this season. I also just think that there's a huge appetite, even though we got college football last year. We got college game day last year. It was just missing something.
Right.
I think there's a.
You didn't want to complain about it because we were just happy to have it at all.
Precisely.
But now that it's over, you're like, there was a little something missing from that.
Yeah. There's not, computer generated sound noise and recordings just doesn't really do it, even on the TV, on the television. So I think there's a huge appetite for getting back to actual normal, and I think at the trajectory we're going, anything but full capacity. Now, whether or not teams will be able to sell enough tickets, but anything other than full capacity available, I think is going to be surprising to me.
I thought it was possible when I posted this question we might get 75% yes. I would have never guessed in a million years it would be 96-4. So there you go. But there is always this caveat. All right, as we get to the feedback of the week, this is Josh Holderby who says, also, I changed my vote to no if we're talking about Northwestern. Nobody ever feels safe in Chicago.
Oh, poor Evanston. What did they do to deserve that?
Now, I've been there recently. The commute that I had to undergo for that 2018 Michigan Northwestern game and everything that went on, it was very planes, trains, and automobiles. Mm-hmm. I will say this, though. Evanston is a gorgeous community. All right, it's actually it's on the good side of Chicago. Here's the problem, though. Most Big Ten teams, well, not necessarily. Yeah, most Big Ten teams are going to be approaching it from the west. I mean, I guess, Penn State, Maryland, Rutgers would be the exceptions, but most everybody else in the Big Ten is going to be approaching Northwestern from the west, which means you have to go through the bad side of Chicago to get to that side that Evanston is on. So that is something to keep in mind. Still, that was a gorgeous community once you get there. All right, that's going to do it for this week's episode of Bigger 10. Don't forget to like, rate, subscribe, 5-star review, whichever the case may be that's available to you on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and of course right here on YouTube. Please help keep spreading the word and sharing what we do here with other Big Ten sports fans just like yourself. And also don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Bigger10 to keep up to date on what we think all things Big Ten between now and our next episode. For Aaron McIntyre, I'm Steve Deace. We'll see you next time.